think we'll get started. Once again, thank you all so much for hopping on. My name is Matthew Groholski. I'm the proud president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Florida. Thank you all so much for joining. I see folks from other states like Texas, Washington State, and abroad. And also thank you to the Progressive Caucus of the North Carolina Democratic Party for co-sponsoring today, and all of our amazing guest speakers who you all will hear from a little bit later in the meeting. It's very, very excited to have you all on today. If you just want to get started with the next slide, Julia. So our meeting agenda today just includes an introduction to the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Florida, what we've been up to on the state level, and also what our county chapters are up to, how to get involved with the caucus and our work, and then we'll be going into our guest speakers as well. So the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Florida is a chartered caucus of the Florida Democratic Party that seeks to develop and promote leftist values and to strengthen the relationship between the progressive community and the Florida Democratic Party. Basically, we're the organization doing the work inside the party to make sure that our party upholds our values, such as Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, abolishing ICE, and a humane foreign policy, for example. That's our platform, that's our North Star, and what we fight to represent inside the Democratic Party. Our 2025, 2027 statewide officers and board are listed here. Most of them are on this call today. Thank you so much to all their work for making things like this call happen. It's an 11-person board, but it's full of absolutely amazing people. And then our 2025, 2027 committee chairs as well. I want to shout out the QR code as well that you can sign. I'll drop it in the chat in just a few. But also wanted to highlight that we have actually added 3 new committee chairs since the last meeting. So we've added Danielle Bonilla for communications, Solana Millick for bylaws and procedures, and Zach Rivera for platform. Very excited to see them do the work. And as I mentioned, that platform committee is actually new. It has been a thing in our bylaws for the past few years, but hasn't been really utilized by the state caucus. And not to age people, the last time the DPCF bylaws were updated weren't in 2018 when I was in middle school. So they definitely need a big change to be modernized and really speak to more updated issues. Of course, the overall vision that we do have definitely relates to issues that we do see across the globe, but does need to be modernized. So if you are interested in serving in our platform committee, please sign up to do so. It would be super helpful because this needs to be modernized, it needs to be fixed, and it cannot just be talking about the same issues that we saw while I was in middle school. Next slide. So we do have several chapters across the whole state of Florida. When we were first elected earlier this year, back in May, we only had 2 county chapters across the entire state of Florida, and that was Polk County and Miami-Dade. Now we're at about 10 chapters that are active, who have boards, have active meetings every single month. So super excited to see that. So if you do live in a county where you do not see a chapter, please email me. I know that there have been folks who have tried to start chapters in Leon County, Duval, Broward, and surrounding counties as well. So definitely feel free to reach out to me to help get your own chapter started, because this is how we do a lot of organizing work. So what have we been up to in the past month? And it is honestly a lot. So we've started 2 new chapters in the state, Osceola, which is pointed on the left, and then Alachua on the right. Pictured are their leadership teams minus the treasurer of the Alachua Caucus. They had very successful interest meetings, and these two chapters are in very, very competitive areas. Osceola County, if you don't know, was a Democrat county. And now it is one of the most competitive counties in the whole state of Florida and even the whole South of the United States. Osceola has a competitive congressional election, it has competitive state house elections, state senate, etc. So it's very important that we do have a progressive caucus to make sure that our representatives who are elected there are the most progressive possible. And then on the right in Alachua County, there is a very crucial state house election that just became open. So we need to ensure that a progressive wins that seat. So I'm very excited to see both these chapters start. I know that they're going to do absolutely amazing work, and they will make a direct impact on these elections that are coming up in 2026. And then some of our chapters hosted voter registration drives. As you may know, the state of our voter registration project is not the best in the state of Florida. And we need to seriously register more Democrats. That is a very crucial thing. And that is crucial to ensuring that progressives win future elections. So in Orange County, which is pictured right here, you'll see me in the pictures. We were crowd canvassing the Tate McRae concert in downtown Orlando, which was really cool, passing out bracelets that had, sayings like progressive, that type of thing like that. So we were just talking everyday voters. I know, well, potential voters and future voters. And I know that Volusia County also hosted one as well. So our chapters are really getting committed to do voter registration because that's how we win the state back. So super excited to see that happen the last month. And then a whole bunch of our folks also joined Labor Day events all throughout the state. You'll see folks pictured at the AFL-CIO Central Florida breakfast, for example, the Polk County Labor Day picnic. You'll see my car in the top right with some sayings and slogans while we participated in a car caravan to promote Unite Here. Some folks also who participated in a visibility event for Unite Here as well. So as we all know, labor is the backbone of our movement. So it's been really cool to see us really emphasize that labor partnership in the state. And then some of our members also attended a Ruthless training to get, skills about campaign management, for example, um, you know, candidate trainings, etc., from a really cool organization that does empower pro-choice women to run for office and to also be campaign managers and campaign staff. So it's been pretty cool to see that as well. And as Ziani said in the chat, Kelly Semrad, who's one of our most progressive elected officials in the state, was also in attendance alongside Angie Nixon, Anna Eskamani, and some other really cool electeds. And then we were at the LGBTQ plus Democratic Caucus Conference, where I was very happy to guest speak on a panel representing the Progressive Caucus. We saw lots of Progressive Caucus members there actually speak on other panels and other discussions, so that was also really cool. And then, of course, our county meetings. Some of them are pictured on this slide right here: Seminole County, Alachua, Hillsborough, Osceola, Orange. But all of our county caucuses and chapters had really successful meetings all throughout the state, which was really, really cool to see. So yeah. And then we also endorsed Matthew Crowley for Winter Haven City Commission. Matthew is a paraeducator. He's a proud labor union member. And I'll be dropping in the chat shortly after my remarks. are mobilized for our day of action to get Matthew across the finish line. Matthew is a young progressive running to actually flip a city commission seat in Winter Haven. And that might not sound like the biggest deal in the world to some people. But Winter Haven was one of the first cities in the state of Florida to ban fluoride from their water, which should not have ever been a political issue, ever. Should not have been. But the city of Winter Haven has imposed policies just because Ron DeSantis and other, goons really try to, influence their city commission. The vote for the 287G agreement with ICE, for example, on the Winter Haven City Commission, it was 3-2. Matthew could have been the vote that stopped Winter Haven from entering an ICE agreement. So this election is actually really, really crucial. It's crucial because we'd be electing another young progressive to a local office that can become a champion for sure. And he already is honestly a localized champion and activist. So it's very, very crucial that we do get Matthew across the finish line. So we're hosting that day of action where we'll be canvassing earlier in the day and then hosting a phone bank alongside pizza party for Matthew to get him across that finish line. So yeah, very excited to endorse Matthew and support him in this bid. And then we also endorse multiple DNC resolutions. You'll be hearing about this a little bit later, of course, in our panel discussion. But we endorsed several that did pass, which we'll probably get into a little bit later. All right, so some quick ways to also get involved. We do have our Progressive People's Conference, February 20th through the 22nd in Orlando, Florida. I did note that there is a Zoom option available plus travel stipends. We're still early in the planning, but we have decided as a state board that this timeline is the best. So February 2nd, 20th through the 22nd, please mark that in your calendars. We'll be hosting it here in Orlando, but of course, accessibility is very fundamental to progressive ideology. So we'll be making sure that it's the most accessible state conference possible. This is not going to be one where you need to spend $400 or even $150. So we'll be making sure that you have all the resources available to attend us and be with us. And then join our state Discord. This is how we get all of our committees going. That's how you will hear directly from the state board the most. And it's a really good community point as well, where you can just be in community and be alongside everyday people. Yes, I will be dropping all the links in the chat as soon as I stop speaking. So just 1 second. But here's also our committee sign up form. I want to emphasize, our platform committee, for example, is completely new, so we definitely need volunteers for that. But this is how you can get really involved in the state caucus and kind of make it your own even, because we are very open to new ideas and new members. Oh, there's somebody speaking. Okay, cool. So we'll be dropping that in the chat shortly to kind of just showcase how you can get involved. All right, so now moving on to our amazing guest speakers. Nadia Ahmad, who is one of our board members for the state caucus and actually served on the DNC for a few years, will just be kind of moderating a panel between these amazing folks. So Nadia, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Matt. It's a real pleasure to be here and to see all of you here. And for me, this is a really important conversation that we're having because we're really at a moment right now that really reflects echoes of the 1860s and 1940s America. And so we need to see that with every great moment and movement that has happened in history. It really started with people who were told they were nobody, who were dismissed, marginalized, kicked, and beaten. And so we have to recognize that there's an urgent moment to act. And so we need to also understand that in these moments of crises, silence is also complicity and action is survival. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity to have this conversation. And so the first panelist that we have as a part of this conversation is Florida's Gen Z DNC member and the Resolution 18 sponsor, Allison Minnerly. And so Allison represents the next generation of Democratic leadership as a Florida DNC member, and she's based in Orange County, and she also brings a very fresh perspective on how the Democratic Party can better serve and represent young Americans. And she also serves on the Florida Democratic Party's Budget and Finance Committee. And so, Allison, as a sponsor of Resolution 18, can you explain to us a little bit about the background about it, as well as why this resolution specifically addresses, and then also why you felt it was important to bring it in the Minneapolis meeting, and then along with what reflections you would have for priorities for younger Democrats?
Yeah, thank you so much. And for those that don't know, Nadia has just been like the most incredible ally, but also is just such an incredible resource that we are so lucky to have here in Florida. So everybody make sure that you show Nadia so much love and thank you for being here and moderating this. I think, to start off, I will say that, you know, I'm a new DNC member. And so for me, earlier this year, back in January, I wanted to become a state committee member because when I realized that in the state of Florida, we can have state committee members that actually vote on the future of what our party is, right? Our party chair, our party leadership. I thought that was so important. And so when I went in that day to our state committee meeting, I had no intention of leaving as a DNC member, right? But there's some incredible young Democrats that I see in this space that we were all in that room and we realized that the future of not only our state party, but our national party was on the line that day by voting for who we want to represent us in the DNC. We all banded together and we knew that we needed young representation. So I'm really honored that all of our young Democrats came together and put their faith and trust in me to help, represent us and the future of our party on that national scale. And so being nominated from the floor and getting a DNC member seat was really unexpected. And I think a lot of people will tell you that that's not necessarily the norm. So I come into this with a little bit of a knowledge deficit, which is why I'm so lucky to have found people like Nadia and like Reem, others on this call that have really helped shape me and help me guide me through this process of what the DNC is. Because I'm curious, I always ask this whenever I go to these spaces. For those in the chat that want to respond, how many of you know who your DNC members are? You can answer yes, you can answer no. Maybe you can answer I'm not sure, or maybe best of all, you'll answer that you want to learn. Okay, you know some. That's good. Because what I'm realizing is that there's a lot of people that might not know them at all. And I think it's a really important untapped organizing demographic, right? Which is that for years we have more of this institutional body that has members that make really big decisions sometimes, especially when it comes to our primaries and other national scale things that impact us. And so becoming a DNC member, one of the things that you'll learn is that you get a lot of different emails from a lot of different people. And when I realized there's such thing as a resolutions process, I began doing a little bit of research. And that's when I understood that there are issues that you can file a resolution on that are beyond just holidays, ceremonial things, memorials. You're actually able to file resolutions on policy. And I think that as progressives, I know I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm curious here if anybody feels like me, where it can be really frustrating sometimes to want such big structural change, but to feel like we're trapped within the party system. How does anybody else feel about that? I feel like I want to see some reactions in the chat, reactions around. I think that's one of the challenges that we have. And I think it's why a lot of progressives, feel so silenced and not necessarily represented. And that's my push to all of you to tell you that filing this resolution was a Google form, me at maybe like 11:55 at night on the day of the deadline, questioning myself of like, is this going to go anywhere? What's going to happen here? And I was really fortunate that, you know, the conversation that we started has grown so much bigger. And I think that for those that don't know, we are really doing incredible work to bring visibility for Palestine, but also just for our progressive issues, right? Because for too long, I know young Democrats and progressive Democrats alike are not necessarily always seen at the table. And so that's kind of my little intro, which I know is a long ramble and a little bit of a yap session, but I'll just summarize the resolution for those that don't know, which is that, like I said, I filed a resolution, simply me and my little Google Sheets at home, and also a lot of help from Nadia kind of crafting and drafting that language, where we called on the DNC on a national level to stop giving weapons to the Israeli government, but also to stop continuing this walking around calling Palestine a state. We need to recognize Palestine as a state. We need to stop sending military aid and weapons. And so those kind of three core tenets are really what drove this resolution. And from there, we got a lot of calls from the people at the top of the DNC that were saying, hey, listen, this is not going to go anywhere. You're going to want to pull this resolution. Just, you know what, for the better of everybody, let's just drop this. And that was just not a reality that we could accept, right? So I'm really glad for all of you. I recognize some names here that helped make calls, emails, texts, and even did some really great work promoting this in their spaces to make sure that people knew about this resolution. And ultimately, while the resolution did not pass, I am not going to tell you here that it failed, because what happened was we started a conversation and we became so loud that they couldn't ignore us. And what that ultimately led to was the chair filing a counter resolution that was much weaker and did not address the moment that we're in, quite frankly, at all. And the fact that the chair knew that our resolution would create such a conversation that he had to file another one to potentially silence it. But also on top of that, the fact that we are in a position where now the chair has agreed to create a task force, which I hear the groaning probably from your screen. What's a task force? What's that going to mean for us? We're obviously going to work on that and try and get more clarity. And of course, you guys will be the first to know when that organizing opportunity comes up. But the chair ultimately realized that his resolution didn't have the support to pass, and that he had to keep listening to us and trying to work with us, because we're not going away and we're not going to be silent. But Nadia, I feel like I rambled a little bit. So if there's any other guiding questions that can steer us back, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be really, really helpful to point out that what do you see in terms of priorities for the resolution going forward? Because there's a meeting coming up in LA, and
Yeah.
so what are you planning?
Absolutely. So I think that, obviously working with a lot of community partners to kind of solicit that feedback and see what directions we move forward. But I really think that there's an important opportunity here to not let this issue die down, right? There is this commitment from the chair to create a task force. So we're going to hold him accountable to that. But we are going to make sure that this task force is not just your usual suspects, right? We want this task force to represent the everyday people, organizers, activists, leaders that we know that are progressive and that champion our issues, and making sure that that space is reflective of that, not just the people that are, the traditional suspects. Like, we saw a lot of movement from DMFI, for those that don't know, that's the Democratic Majority for Israel, and also from AIPAC, that have really had a say in shaping the party's position on this. And so we want to stand up, everyday people, organizers, and make sure that our voices are seen and represented, and that it doesn't just get diluted by special interests.
Okay, thank you. That was super helpful. Next, I'm going to also bring into the conversation Sunjay Muralitharan, who is leading the College Democrats of America, which is the official student outreach arm of the Democratic National Committee. It represents college Democrats at campuses across the country. He's based in Fremont, California, and also plays a role in terms of how political engagement and organizing happens.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to thank all of you for being here. I know how busy day-to-day life can be. I actually have my LSAT coming up, so I am incredibly stressed, but it's incredibly inspiring to see so many people here who are committed to fighting back against the global injustice and current fascist regime that we're seeing. I also wanted to thank Nadia and Matthew for inviting me to speak with you all, and I just wanted to share a bit about kind of the College Democrats' perspective behind this resolution and kind of the full story of how this issue has come to define my time in College Democrats of America over the past year and now. So to kind of set the scene, as Nadia mentioned, the College Democrats of America are the effective collegiate arm of the DNC. But how I like to view us is that we don't represent the Democratic Party to young people. We represent the young people to the Democratic Party. We have over 500 chapters across the country, tens of thousands of members who are effectively the foot soldiers of this party, right? We aren't among the consultant class, nor are we really a special interest group who gets paid a ton of money to do this. I'm a volunteer, my whole board is a volunteer, all of our state leaders and tens of thousands of campus leaders are all volunteers who do this work for free because we care. And this work is actually what powers this party. We're the ones who knock on doors, who phone bank, who do the 24/7 direct campus engagement that ensures that we have staffers for our campaigns, but also have voters who turn out. And to me, if our work is what powers this party, it's deeply important that our priorities do so as well. So when many of my personal friends, many of which were college Democrats, took to the streets to protest what they believed to be global injustice, all the way back in February, March, and April of 2024, we were quick to stand by them as they peacefully protest.
Would you?
And why? Because to us, it's essential that our country respects human life over global dominance and imperialist rhetoric. And this happened all the way back in April 2024, and across the board, we were hit with anti-Semitism allegations, but we pushed through and got tons and tons of coverage from news sources across the board, from the New York Times, to PBS to AP, but we heard nothing from the higher ups in the DNC or the higher ups in the Biden administration. And to us, this was deeply disheartening because we were doing this to help ensure that we actually won in November. I remember telling the New York Times back then that we were publicly calling on the Biden administration to change course because we saw how this was going to hurt us in November. I told them that we can have all the manpower in the world. We can have money and people and organizers, but if we're given a broken script, it's incredibly difficult for us to excite young voters. But as I mentioned before, nothing changed. But we kept going. We continued to organize for the party. Our campuses were ground zero for Harris. Chapters like the ECU College Democrats and MSU hosted major rallies where thousands and thousands of people showed up. And I myself did tons of media coverage in favor of the vice president. And even after our election loss, we continued to do the essential groundwork that powers this party. We organized our 18 statewide campuses in Wisconsin and bust out organizers from Michigan and Minnesota to ensure that Crawford dominated the student vote. And she did, in an incredible ratio of 9-1. To put it simply, our work powers this party, and so should our concerns. But as Allison already discussed, that is not what we saw in the past DNC meeting. It would be one thing if we put it to a vote, right? And it failed. Like, say the DNC members across the board were against it and opted for a different resolution. Fine, that's how the game is played. That's fair, and that's how it should be done. Or at the very least, that Ken kept his resolution, which to me didn't go as far as it needed, but was a step in the right direction, compared to the blank check policy that we've seen our party give to Israel, where no matter what they do, we're always going to give them taxpayer money and respect them, regardless of their violation of the international human rights, specifically the right to life. But that's not what happened. It didn't get a vote, and it was simply killed in committee. And after it was killed in committee, Ken and the DNC leadership actually pulled that resolution from the floor, which pretty much, in my opinion, I mean, while yes, he decided to start a task force, was essentially an attempt to kind of quell the work that we had done to get this far. And moments like this, to me, don't uh, shouldn't be seen as moments of frustration and disappointment, but it underscores the importance of people like us being involved in this party. You know, the only reason why a resolution like this failed is because the larger body in the DNC delegation as a whole didn't elect DNC officers who were conscious of this issue and actually respected the viewpoints of the Democratic Party electorate as a whole. And in moments like this, it's important that we work to meaningfully build power. And I mean, in your county parties, central committee members, or in your state parties, like you all are here today, joining the Progressive Caucus of Florida, or in the national level, like Allison and myself as DNC members. That's how we begin to move the needle. But if you don't love party work, you can always join a campaign and even run for office yourself. In College Democrats of America, there's quite a few of our members that go on to run for office as early as the age of 19 to their early 20s. From Liam Ritchie in East Lansing to our very own membership director, Aidan DeMarco in New Jersey. These are students gunning for city council and school board races to ensure that their priorities are heard in all levels of government. It's easy to feel disheartened and that there is no way forward. But throughout history, we've always seen that history is something that isn't stagnant. It's something that moves when we do. And the time for us to move is now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sanjay. There was a couple questions in the chat. I hope you could answer.
Yes.
One of them is about the membership of the DNC. How can people in a specific state find out who their DNC members are?
Of course. So I think it varies per state. So I don't know if I can speak to Florida, but for California, when you go to your state party's website, there should be a list of your DNC delegation. But if that isn't the case, then I would recommend emailing your state party chair or vice chair to get you a list, because it should be public information, but I know some state parties are a bit weird about it. But the state party chair should have the information updated at all times.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we're going to go on to our next speaker, who is Reem Subei. She serves as the co-chair of the DNC's Interfaith Council, which works to bridge faith communities with progressive democratic values. And she really brings an important level of expertise on how religious and spiritual perspectives can really inform and strengthen politics. Reem?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me. So, this is my first time joining the DNC, and I'm still actually not a voting DNC member, even though I am now the co-chair of the Interfaith Council. So the Interfaith Council has a seat on it, which allows for community voices and seeks to bring in diverse grassroots members of the community. And that's how I was able to run for the seat, with a lot of gratitude to Nadia for always being a leader in bringing in diverse voices and grassroots groups to the DNC and to any party involvement. So I was the chair of the Muslim Caucus at the Young Democrats of America for several years. I had co-founded that caucus with a few colleagues when I first showed up to the Young Democrats of America about 6 years ago, and was surprised to find caucuses of various other groups, but I did not find a caucus for Muslims. So we had gotten together a few folks that we had just met at that event. It was either in Cincinnati, Ohio, or perhaps in Indiana. I'm forgetting. And we just wanted to pray because it was Friday prayer for Muslims, and we didn't have a room that was available to us. And that's when we realized that there needs to be a Muslim caucus within the Young Democrats of America to bring in the voices of individuals who are Muslim, who are attending those events and need a space to be able to practice. And so, as an extension of that, I looked to the DNC and wanted to join the Interfaith Council. One of the issues that I've seen with the Democratic Party is that there's a failure to amplify the voices of faith within the Democratic Party, something that the Republican Party has capitalized on in a way that's very negative. And so with the increase of weaponization and the utilization in various processes, including legal processes, I'm an attorney at my full-time job, of Christian nationalism, right? And specifically white Christian nationalism that is being wielded against communities of color, against minority communities, and utilized in a way that perpetuates injustice in our country. It was really important for me, and it was really important for all the folks who showed up, because we had a great turnout of folks who came to help me win the seat, because they wanted to see new voices. And that's something that we often miss, is the voices of folks who are not the typical voices within the Democratic Party, right? Especially, for example, now when we have the growing movement for Palestinian liberation and folks who have taken issue with the positions of the Democratic Party on the Palestinian liberation movement, there's a failure to actively include those voices. And that's something that Allison and Nadia and several others, and I see some folks on the call who have been leaders in doing that. But really the key and the opportunity here is that if we can bring enough people to this space, then we can recreate and reframe the entire conversation, because there's a large group of individuals, and ones that I interacted with when I was at the DNC my first time at the DNC this summer, who are unhappy with the positions of the party, but they don't feel empowered enough. They don't have enough information and enough infrastructure to make their voices heard and to take those positions to the next level. And that's where the work that Allison is doing and others are doing provides the ability, because if it's just going to be Allison or and me and Nadia, or even all of you, it's not enough. But when we create this space, this infrastructure, it allows others to come in, because not every person is going to have the time, knowledge, or courage, perhaps, to build that infrastructure. But if we build it, and if we make clear that there is space and that there is a mandate that we have, I have a mandate from within my moral values, and you, I'm sure a lot of you have a mandate from within your moral values, whether you derive them from faith or otherwise, to speak out for justice, to speak out for issues that uplift the lives of civilians, the issues that uplift equity and equality. Once you make that clear, and the louder that you speak that, it invites others who were interested, but maybe didn't have the built-in knowledge of how to do that.
Thank you, Reem. I wanted to go back to a point you just raised about how sometimes people will support the issue, but they're not willing to speak up on it or really make the vote that would make the change. And so can you speak a little bit about how to convince those people the other way?
Yeah, thank you so much for uplifting that, Nadia. I'm the chair of the Arab Caucus at the North Carolina Democratic Party, which was co-founded about I would say now a year and some change ago. Maybe it's going on 2 years actually. Time flies. But so we just passed an arms embargo resolution at the North Carolina Democratic Party this June. It's the first arms embargo that is a total arms embargo in any state party. And the way that it passed is we worked really hard. There were several individuals who had been organizing for justice, for peace for many years within the party. But then when we brought it to the body, we had made contact and built relationships with many individuals, but our North Carolina Democratic Party State Executive Committee is actually the largest state executive committee in the country in terms of a state party executive committee. So there's over 600 people on our state executive committee, most of which we hadn't directly made contact with on this issue, but they were presented with this opportunity and they had to vote. They could vote yes, no, or abstain. They could have abstained, but actually the resolution passed, and it passed on the first attempt at the state executive committee. So when people were provided with the opportunity to make their voices heard and to speak out for Palestinian lives in this example, they spoke out in favor of justice. They spoke out in favor of freedom. Had we not put this before them, most of them would not necessarily be able to, either it's time, either it's lack of knowledge, either it's lack of access to other individuals to organize. Most of them would not have been able to bring forward such a resolution and advocate for it. So, I think when you meet with those individuals and you build relationships, and when you present them with the opportunity, you will find that the majority of folks within the Democratic Party are actually supportive of issues of morality and justice, but there's a lot of fear. People have been doxxed. People are afraid of being doxxed. People have seen their friends lose their jobs, and people will make the right choice, but they just need help to get there.
Okay, thank you so much, Reem. Next, we wanted to turn it over to Alan Minsky, who serves as the Executive Director of Progressive Democrats of America, which is a grassroots organization dedicated to advancing progressive policies within the Democratic Party and beyond. Alan, can you give us a little bit about your organization's history of progressive advocacy and what concrete steps the DNC should take to incorporate more progressive policies and voices for its platform, but also more specifically about what work needs to be done for Resolution 18?
Wow. Well, of course, I want to thank Allison for putting forward Resolution 18. And, I'm very close to Jim Zogby, and I was on Jim Zogby's national call the days right before that went forward. And Jim and I, who we partner on just about everything, but we had just sort of a different tactical approach on Resolution 18. We were very much for supporting it and calling upon everybody to support it, not to think about the prospect of losing that vote and if it would look really bad for the Democratic Party writ large, just the belief that maybe people just saw from what was transpiring in Gaza and the absolute horror and inhumanity of the slaughter and the genocide there, that people would see the light and therefore vote appropriately to block weapons and support Resolution 18. And I actually think that strategy and that tactical approach, and again, I was unable to make it to Minnesota because of family obligations. I was at the DNC meeting in the weekend of October 7th, 2023 in St. Louis, Missouri, which of course is very, very memorable. I was actually on a picket line out in Wentzville, Missouri at a UAW strike when I heard the news about the October 7th attacks, and instantly my response is that the Netanyahu government is going to respond with slaughter. That was my understanding from the get-go. And it exceeded even what I feared at that point. Just having seen how, the Netanyahu government, the Israeli government, been responding to these things, and how it's a continuity with not just the Zionist project, but a continuity with the continuing right-wing lurching further and further right and more reactionary approach to the population of Greater Palestine from the Israeli government. We've obviously seen some progress made recently with more Congress people signing on to the Block the Bombs Act from Delia Ramirez, which we support, and we coordinate with a whole table of organizations that are pushing to get more people to sign on. We have Ro Khanna's most recent introduction of a petition, which we're promoting for recognition of a Palestinian state. Unfortunately and tragically, all of this movement is in the context of a Republican majority in the House and in the Senate. There are Republicans who are sympathetic to us and can join us on these things, but the majority of Democrats remain locked into a really horrendous consciousness around supporting what many of them are pressured into supporting through the force of the Israel lobby and the AIPAC lobby. But we just want to work as consistently and as unequivocally moving forward to try to persuade people to do what is really, as Chris Hedges says, is the moral issue of our time right now, which is Gaza. And I'm also, by the way, very active among Jewish American activists. I've spearheaded along with allies, most particularly with Roots Action. But these are not actually institutional sign-on forms. Both Norman Solomon, Jeff Cohn from Roots Action, and myself, we've written now 2 different Jewish American sign-on letters that the nation has signed on, and really trying to build momentum for those who are on the call who might be Jewish American. It's certainly my belief and been my belief with my allies among the Jewish American community that what Israel is doing and really the aggressive Zionist project writ large is terrible for Jews around the world and terrible for Jews in America. I think the sentiment was expressed on South Park on the last episode by was it Kyle's mom, the character, even as she approaches Netanyahu. And I think it's obvious to anybody right now. This is the great driver of the growth of anti-Semitism. Tragically, because anti-Semitism, like any kind of bigotry, is total foolishness. But nevertheless, the reality is the driver of anti-Semitism, of course, are the actions of the Netanyahu government and Israeli government right now. And so it's really incumbent upon everyone who wants a more peaceful and just world. And of course, we fully support the human rights, civil rights, full rights of self-determination in land, and self-determination for the Palestinian people. And we have to impress upon the populations that are in Greater Palestine to support such positions, and however we can. And some of it's tactical, some of it is more broadly strategic. I mean, calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state, if it's tacitly supporting a 2-state solution, which I agree with Zohran Mamdani, I don't really support any state that doesn't support the full human rights of all of its population. But for PDA as an organization, to get back to that, we broadly are in line with what I'm speaking right now. Sometimes there's a little difference between my own particular personal activism. The reason, by the way, that those sign-on letters are not endorsed by PDA and Roots Action, for instance, is because when we're asking people to sign on, we don't want, if they have an institutional affiliation, for them to have to jump through the hoops of asking for institutional support in order for them to sign on. So those are signed on by individuals. And when you see my name listed as Executive Director, Progressive Democrats of America, that's just for identification purposes. And it says on the sign-on petitions that that's the case. So Progressive Democrats of America, to go back to the first half of Nadia's question, and let's return back to supporting Resolution 18. And also, I know, Nadia, you and I have to talk about what inevitably will be PDA's yes agreement and sign on to whatever your next initiative is at the DNC. And hopefully I'll be able to attend the next DNC meeting. I couldn't attend this last one. But for Progressive Democrats of America, for people who are not aware, look, if you look at the year 2004 when PDA was founded, and you look at Bill Clinton's election as the beginning of the real sort of low point for the influence of left progressivism within the Democratic Party, PDA was founded in the wake of the crisis that occurred following Ralph Nader's campaign for president, and you in Florida know full well how that played out. And I work closely with Ralph Nader. I don't blame Ralph Nader for what happened there. Ralph Nader was running in the wake of Ross Perot's much more successful challenges in 92 and 96 as a third-party candidate. The idea of a third-party strategy, as Ralph decides to run as a third-party candidate in 1999 and 2000, was a much more open question. It's true that the Democratic Party and Republican parties had actually responded to the Ross Perot challenge to really double down on creating exclusive political terrain in the United States that was going to make it much harder for third parties to compete. But by 2004, the people who founded PDA, who had come out of the Jesse Jackson campaigns in 84 and 88, they really saw from that experience that the pathway for a progressive politics, which of course is wholly inclusive for all communities in the country in terms of civil rights and human rights, and their full support in that regard, but also to support a politics and an economics that lift up the welfare of working class Americans and middle class Americans, runs completely counter to the trajectory of the party that Bill Clinton had solidified following his election in 92. And you see the Democrats lose control of Congress in 94. And I think that's the era in which you see this new politics of complete bifurcation, but a bifurcation that's predicated upon a Democratic Party that does not really stand for the welfare of working people. Okay, not the mainstream of the party. The base of the party do, but not the mainstream of the party. And you see more and more of the working class base of the Democratic Party drift away from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. The Democratic Party is defined by really two figures in particular, Bill Clinton and then Barack Obama. And what everyone makes of their skills as politicians or what may or may not be in their heart. And I always have believed that Obama got a bit of a rough deal from history because he didn't run to assume the presidency at the moment that the international economy would collapse, therefore making his class politics much more foregrounded. But you have a graduate of Yale Law and Harvard Law. And when the general public looks out at that Democratic Party and they see them as a party of elites, if you look at the career of Barack Obama and of Bill Clinton and their arrival both at Cambridge for law school and New Haven for law school, they are anointed there as these incredibly talented people who aren't from the upper class, but they can really reflect the ideology that's prevalent at a place like Harvard Law and Yale Law. By the way, Yale Law tends to be a little bit more progressive than Harvard Law a little bit more business oriented. And so you have these politicians who define the party whose interests are not in line with the working class base of the Democratic Party, and therefore not in line with the majority base of the Democratic Party. And so PDA was founded in 2004 to try to alter that and to realize that the pathway forward for progressive politics was within the two-party system, that third-partyism was largely, just because of the way the lay of the land was set, was at best a waste of time, more realistically, actually serving Republican ends and even more reactionary ends. Because if you join on with a third party in that context, you're pretty much assuring the election of the Republicans. So that's why PDA was founded. And of course, our great historical moment came in 2013 at a retreat in Arizona, which I attended, where PDA voted to launch the Run Bernie Run campaign to draft Bernie Sanders to run for president. And PDA singularly ran that campaign by itself for about 2 years until National Nurses United joined us. And we were the draft Bernie Sanders to run as a Democrat, which is a big issue. And we succeeded. And Bernie Sanders ran as a Democrat, and that changed American politics by re-elevating progressive policies. Again, unequivocal support for the full human and civil rights for all of the citizenry, but also even most significantly with Sanders. And of course, a more progressive foreign policy, though that admittedly in the Sanders campaign was a minor component compared to his major component, which was a class politics and a sort of class-defined set of economic politics to re-foreground the struggles of the American middle class, working class, and poor Americans, the majority of the population, and even people who were ostensibly doing better in the middle class, who had to face all these huge bills that really undercut any prospect for achieving the American dream as all wealth and power consolidated into the hands of elites. And so PDA changed American politics with launching Bernie Sanders' campaign for president. So in that respect, the squad are the offspring of PDA, Justice Democrats, our revolution, the rise of DSA. All of this is a product of an organization that already had a national base in 2016. Why Bernie Sanders launched our revolution as opposed to just building that into PDA? I was not yet executive director then, but I think it has a little bit to do with Bernie wanting his own organization. And also perhaps because Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. He's an independent. And he maybe was a little weary of the term Democrat being inside the organization that he would be affiliated with. That and the founding executive director of PDA had died by that time, Tim Carpenter. And Tim, more than anyone, even within PDA, was the person who had twisted Bernie's arm to run as a Democrat. Of course, Bernie got very frustrated with the Democratic Party in the course of the 2016 campaign, as we all know. And so that maybe also played into things. But our revolution and PDA have a partnership, and PDA has been exhibiting a lot of growth around the country. We had some technical hiccups in 2025 already as we changed databases, but we're overcoming those and we're returning back to growing at a good pace. We have a really excellent team that works on the Young Progressive Democrats of America. And our policies are basically in line with the Zohran Mamdani campaign, the squad's politics, Bernie's politics. And I just want to say to you all, I am so impressed with the organization that you have built in Florida to build up such a powerful base. I mean, just the people that I know who are on this call, who I've worked with across time, and that you are in the state of Florida for all of the trials and tribulations that you have inside Florida, and how difficult it must be to organize as progressives in Florida, but also just as Democrats. And to see all of you collected here, from Wendy to Allison to Nadia to the great Jim Langford, who is, of course, with PDA. And we could not be more proud to have Jim be one of our core organizers in the country, to the role he's had in helping anchor progressivism in Central Florida and all of Florida. I think it's exemplary. And I think there's a great example out in Arizona of a state that had a very weak Democratic Party. And Arizona hasn't just trended, it's perhaps PDA's single greatest stronghold in the country. And Arizona is one of these states, a little bit like Colorado, Oregon, Washington. They've transitioned from being a neoliberal Democratic Party and in a swing state to being a really progressive Democratic Party at its base. And Arizona, of course, was the first state in the country to put forward a measure. By North Carolina was second, and given what Reem was talking about around North Carolina. But the first was Arizona to put forward a resolution that I think is very, very important for every state to look into pursuing, which is the elimination of big money and all money except hopefully, just equitable spending in primaries and Democratic Party primaries. With elimination of dark money and big money in Democratic Party primaries, I think it will be an incredible boon to the Democratic Party nationally if that is actually adopted. If we are the party that has honest and fair, not influenced by big money primaries, and then of course we were not saying we would go to a gunfight with a butter knife. In the general election, we would of course compete with Republicans and try to draw on, by necessity, as much money as possible. But the people who come out of our primaries not being influenced by big money, that comes out of the Arizona Democratic Party, that comes out of Arizona PDA. And then directly, the committee that formed it was formed by PDA, and the person who led it, Kai Newkirk, is a longtime PDA associate, and he's leading that drive nationally. So if you can just imagine just a a gold standard, as it were, progressive policy agenda, and a pro-democracy, and for international law and human rights and civil rights internationally, a recasting of foreign policy. I think that's what you have with PDA. When you look at the electoral wing of DSA and things like the Mamdani campaign, those are the kind of policies in urban centers, and we are big advocates of something called a rural New Deal. I think we have the policies that the American public wants to see. We're trying to envision a kind of country which is all inclusive, that celebrates our diversity. I mean, America's greatest asset in a globalized economy is being the most diverse country in the history of the world, and we're all for that. We don't buy for a second that there's any kind of real grassroots mass population reaction against the summer of George Floyd and a reversion back to pre-Me Too sexism, Me Too movement sexism, and pre-summer of George Floyd racism. These are phantasms created by right-wing media that appeal to a small base of the domestic population in the United States, the real sort of reactionary MAGA pro-Proud Boys base. We think the majority of the population wants to live in a non-sexist, anti-racist society, and we want to see wealth distributed in a way so that the power is not concentrated in the hands of an oligarchic set, but is in the hands back of the majority of the population, such that they can pursue an economic politics that distributes the incredible wealth that's generated by this country, so that we don't have very little poverty, if no poverty at all, and we have a working class that is a prosperous middle class. One job per person per year should provide a living wage for them wherever they're living. They should have free universal health care, and they should have time for vacation as a right as an American. And that's the kind of world we want to see here at PDA, and that's what we push for. And once again, I applaud you for your absolutely exemplary organizing in a very difficult context in the great state of Florida. So, which I hope to visit in November, by the way. So
Thank you so much, Alan. That was just absolutely wonderful. I wanted to ask our panelists a question that will be brought to them from the audience members. So if you have any specific questions for our speakers, you can use the raise hand function and we'll call upon you. But I wanted to go to the first question that was already asked in the chat by Humaira Afzal, which was, can we expect another attempt to get the resolution passed at the December DNC meeting? And then I'll turn it over to Angel.
Well, for that, in terms of that specificity of tactics, I would defer to Allison, what Allison is thinking right now. We would support whatever lead Allison and Nadia want us to support. I'm certainly not opposed to it. It sounds like a great idea. Allison and Nadia, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. And I think that this is a complicated thought, but there's one good thing, which is we have a little bit of time on our sides, right? So we have until December, when this meeting really takes place in LA, that we're going to have really hard conversations again. And so I think something that we've been trying to work on and trying to see is which direction the chair is going to go with this task force, with this committee that they're trying to build, right? Which we have not heard much about. And so that's a concern on our end, right? Of, you've made a promise, we're going to hold you to it. So I would like to see where that can go. And obviously throughout the month of October, that's going to be a big focus of mine, is nailing that in when we hit that 2-month out mark. But the short answer to your question is that I am considering it. I think that something I don't want to get in the habit of is just getting a cycle where we keep filing resolution, even if there's minor tweaks or minor edits, but I'm definitely open to that, even though I haven't, drafted anything or formalized that yet.
Okay, I have two things I got to say. One is, Allison, you will win every election ever under the sun, including the presidency of the United States, as long as you have those two puppy dogs behind you playing like they are over your, I think, left shoulder.
Yes.
It's absolutely adorable. The world would love it. Out here in California, the great progressive victory for the city controller from a former Green Party member, Kevin Mejia, was because he put big posters of his Yorgie all over town. He campaigned around his Yorgie and he won. So, but those are absolutely adorable. The second part is, though, it is awfully distracting to hear what you're saying. But I think we all just have to be aware you have to keep them there because they're too adorable. So thank you for that. But just again, I was thinking that when you're saying it. So you're saying that we just have time and we have to see where it's going, and you'll basically maybe play your cards a little close to your chest, so to speak, and then decide what to do. And we'll support whatever you want to do.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to loop folks more intentionally when I have a little bit more concrete steps. I admit, between being a DNC membership is not built for people that have day jobs, right? Think about it. It's also not built for people that do not have access to money. It's multiple meetings throughout the year, different locations, hotel rooms, flights, right? It's very expensive. And from the day that I was elected as a DNC member towards the end of January, I had 2 days to get a ticket to DC and get a hotel room and get that all sorted out. So I think that it's interesting. Every time the meeting's in a different spot, but the membership is just not designed with working class people in mind. And I think that's an unfortunate reality. So I would say that I don't even know what you said that prompted me to bring that up, but I think it just brings up something for me, which is like, we have little bit of time, right? Which is that we have a few months, but for people like me that have a day job, but also that, struggle with other things, I think it's a little bit of a challenge to anticipate what those next few months look like. And I'm just definitely, like you said, playing my cards close to my chest, but also I'll add one thing while I'm here too, just in case I get any questions. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and this is Renesmee. They're not very happy that it's 7 o'clock and they haven't had their walk yet, but they appreciate your patience.
Thank you for that. And I want to say too, by the way, I'm not trying conspicuously to look like a Picasso blue period. It's just the sun coming down. These are very, very dark blue curtains that are casting this light on me. And then the blue shirt, I know I look like, might look a little odd in the lighting, but I apologize for that. It's usually brighter up here in this room. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Angel?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Angel, or you can call me Angel. I live in Miami, where I'm the president of the Miami chapter of the Progressive Caucus. I'm also the state vice president of the Progressive Caucus here in Florida. And I'm also the chair of the membership committee. So I wear many hats. I like to accessorize. First, I want to thank Allison and everybody who's been involved with this process, Nadia, Matt, for putting this together. Just to contextualize my question, as somebody who's organizing, kind of agreeing with basically the point you were just saying, it's the Democratic Party is not accessible to working class people. Therefore, it's reflected in the leadership because you don't have working class people in party leadership. And I'm also an educator, and as the summer's ended and we're starting school, one of the things that I keep thinking about as I'm thinking about organizing in the party is modeling behavior. That's something I teach my students, or rather, I explain to them, I'm trying to model the behavior that I want you to embody. And so I think that in the Progressive Caucus, what I envision us, and I think many people share that with me, is what would the ideal Florida Democratic Party look like? And I think it goes down to working class leadership in the Democratic Party. How can we address the inequality that makes it impossible for working people to be represented in the party? You either have to be independently wealthy or sell out. And so my question broadly to everyone, because I started a spreadsheet, it's kind of in a few fragments, is like, are you aware of how many progressive caucuses there are in the 50 states and territories that there are Democratic parties? And I know that there's PDA, but is there an in-party national Democratic Progressive Council? And if not, I think that that's something that we should develop to model what we think the DNC should be like, so that when I talk to people about Palestine, they're not just like, oh, but the Democratic Party is genocidal, just like the Republicans, because that's the reality of what people are saying on the ground in progressive spaces that I'm in. And that's not just the DSA. So that's broadly the sentiment that I wanted to express to everybody here.
Well, many, many things. Can I tackle that if it's okay, since I probably won't be at the next meeting? And some of what you spoke to on how is directly related to work we do. First of all, it is always worth noting that, yes, the Joe Biden administration had an unbelievably horrendous set of policies around Gaza and Palestine and Israel. But if you do look at the people who've signed on to the Block the Bombs legislation, even though Marjorie Taylor Greene does say some things against the Israeli government, and a few other members do, they're almost exclusively always only Democrats that are signing on to those. And in fact, one of the things that we're doing at PDA, we're going to, and Nadia Ahmed has been involved with this in the past, and we're going to try to recharge this, is development of a unique national chapter called PDA Middle East Alliances, because the truth is and there are a lot of people who are not non-progressive members of the broader Arab American community Some are outspoken, some might be wealthier Americans whose economic policies don't match with ours. But the truth of it is the champions around a sane foreign policy in the Middle East have been not only almost exclusively Democrats, they've been really exclusively progressive Democrats. And so an alliance really is there that needs to be solidified. And that's what we hope to achieve in that unique national chapter, which of course will go about and endorse candidates like any chapter does, but as a unique national chapter, really focus on the chapters, the candidates across the country who have a sane policy. It's true that the Democratic Party and its executive branch most recently had horrible policies towards Israel and Palestine, but the only block of elected officials are the progressive Democrats who have the same policy. Okay, as for the coordination of progressives across the country, I am very proud to have initiated, as the head of PDA, an organization called the State Democratic, the Progressive Caucuses of the State Democratic Parties, and it is a coalition of all of the progressive. Getting feedback on somebody's mic here, but it does exist. So there is a network of about 30 different progressive caucuses around the country that exists in a body that really hasn't met right now for the last few months. Partly that's my fault, but largely it's the Trump administration's fault for just blitzing all of us with so much that we've been on our back heels like everybody else in terms of what we've been responding to. It will meet again soon, and it is a coordinated effort to bring all of the progressive caucuses of the state Democratic parties together. And they're about 25 to 30. A number of states, they don't have caucuses. A number of the states don't allow ideological caucuses. So there's no progressive caucus of the state Democratic Party like what you are. But about 25 to 30 of them do. Some of them have different names. In Georgia, for instance, you're not officially allowed to have a caucus. So it's the Progressive Caucus the Progressive Council Caucus of the Democratic Party. It has to be a council, not a caucus, for it to exist. So they exist in different forms. But some of them, for instance, in Nevada, which has no caucuses, the very successful effort and then unsuccessful effort to control the Democratic Party from the progressive base, the movement that won that control is who we coordinate with, even if there's no official progressive caucus. So there's about 25 to 30 states that actually have formal progressive caucuses of the state Democratic parties, and we bring them into coalition again with in the other states with groups that are analogous to that, as best as we can identify them. So there is an effort to coordinate that, Angel, and it's not as powerful or as well coordinated as it needs to be, but I think the time has come for it to be more so. And Jim and I and a few other people work on organizing that, and we need to reconvene very soon and make sure that those bonds are strong. Now, there are also progressive caucuses in state legislatures, and there's been an effort by the DC-based Progressive Caucus to coordinate among them. That's not even as far along as we've gotten with the caucuses of the state Democratic parties. But we do intend to coordinate with that group as well. So we'd have a coordination between the progressive caucuses at the state legislative level, as well as in the state parties. But it does exist at the state parties, just hasn't met for the past few months, but we'll go back to meeting again. And it's produced some good coordination already. And it is already the backbone, for instance, of the coordination as we go from state to state on these efforts to get big money out of politics in the Democratic Party primaries. I know there are other aspects to what Angel asked, but I'll just have answered those two and leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you so much, Danielle.
Hello, thank you for coming. I had a question as to, I think a lot of the states that have progressive candidates and that we're seeing progressive candidacy grow is where they have ranked choice voting. And I'm curious if there are any moves to push for ranked choice voting in other states, and if so, how are we doing that?
Of course, it worked very well in the New York.
Wait, before I jump on to the next, I just wanted to ask the rest of the questions, so people can ask the questions, then we'll answer them in order. Jim, if you wanted to bring up your question.
Yeah, but I think Danielle was ahead of me.
No,
If she wants to-
I'm gonna ask all the questions and then we'll have the speakers answer
Oh,
them.
okay. Well, I was wanting to ask Allison if there had been any movement on Chair Martin's suggestion or proposal of setting up a joint kind of commission to explore different ways of combining the two resolutions that were put forward and coming up with some kind of a hybrid that everybody can agree on. So that's all I wanted to ask.
Okay, thank you. Matthew? Matthew, if you wanted to ask your question. Nathan, I'll turn it over to you if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, I had a few questions. I'm trying to remember all of them. But one of them was I remember looking at the map of the different caucuses for the Progressive Caucus across the state of Florida. I noticed Palm Beach didn't have any. So then I went to check if on like the Palm Beach County Democratic Party's website to see if we have a progressive club. I see that there is a progressive caucus, but they're not connected with this one. I just wanted to ask like what the situation is, just because it would probably be pretty neat to have one over here.
Thank you. So the first question was about the ranked choice voting in the primaries. Second question was about the status of the task force. And the third question was about Palm Beach County. So if anybody wants to jump in on that, Reem and Sunjay, haven't heard from you lately.
Reem, do you want to go?
Can I get the question again?
Ranked choice voting is the first one.
So I do know when we were at the DNC, we actually met up with someone who is running an organization that works on ranked choice voting, and they are working really hard to bring back to state parties and to states around the country. So there's definitely an effort happening on that. Yeah, I mean, that's all the information I know on this, but I do want to touch on something that is like a theme in all the questions and the answers that have been happening, which is the progressive caucuses and progressives within the Democratic Party. And so I just want to start by saying, I'm also in North Carolina. I'm the second vice chair of our progressive caucus in North Carolina. But something that I found very important is to not only frame issues of justice and morality as progressive. So we have found it really useful and important to explain that issues of Palestinian lives and Palestinian liberation is not a progressives issue. It's not an issue that only young people or Gen Z or liberals or woke people believe in. Rather, it's an issue that appeals, per the polls, to all to a majority of all people, not just a majority of all Democrats, but a majority of all people in the United States. So that's something that we found very important, and it's valuable to, of course, continue to build progressive caucuses, but it's also valuable to push the values and the issues that we support across various platforms within the party.
Can I say this though? I agree with that entirely. I also think that the Democratic Party, and I think this is accurate, and I'd be happy to have a debate with anybody on it. So this is definitely a different framing than what Reem just said, because I completely agree with what Reem said. And believe me, there's so many days of the week where I want to get away from being identified as progressive or left as Democrat and just be a citizen or a resident citizen talking to people about what the society needs. But within the Democratic Party, on the issue that does receive the highest rankings of people's concerns in terms of polling on every election. I mean, right now, who knows where fascism sits, because this is extreme what Trump is doing, but it is quote unquote kitchen table issues. It's affordability issues. It's the way that the economy is breaking households and things are not working for them. And there's a split in the Democratic Party. We do not share the same political ideology as Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. We simply don't. And it's true they might not be the worst in terms of wanting to cut social programs like the worst of the Republicans. So on certain votes, we may align with them, but they're corporate neoliberals, and therefore maintaining a highly financialized structure to the economy that serves Wall Street and private equity and does not foreground the interests of average households and working people and the maintenance of strong public health and public education and the just general welfare of the average population. They're totally fine with a status quo maintenance in which not only the majority of the population struggles with no way forward to envisioning, quote unquote, the American dream, if you want to call it that, but also the money continuing, all profits going to the wealthy and to the investor class. And that's what they're locked into. They're very locked into the support from corporate America for the Democratic Party. And they're going to be candidates that are going to maintain that status quo, and they're going to maintain candidates that break with it. And I think within the Democratic Party, there's I think a lot of the national media doesn't want to recognize it, but I think it's very true that there's a big fissure in this regard. And I think the majority of the population is with us. They certainly are not with the economic status quo. There are a whole bunch of Trump voters who are with us, who are not with the economic status quo. But I don't think we should be shy about at least that division within the party.
Thank you. Sunjay or Allison, did you want to add anything else to those questions?
Allison did get asked about the second question about the committee, which I think she answered before, but maybe she should reiterate for who asked that again. When is Martin going to form the committee? Jim Langford asked it.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, which is that there's not really too much of an answer there right now. So I think what's really interesting is not surprising, right? When we first filed our resolution back in August, we did not hear from the chair throughout that process, right? We heard from the DNC staff. We heard that there was rumblings of, the resolution, you should kill it, but we didn't hear much from them. So it's not out of the norm that we haven't heard anything from them now. I think that given the scale and the scope of this issue and just, how large this became and the conversation that we started, I do feel like there probably should have been somebody that reached out or said something by now. So we're going to be asking those hard questions in the next month. And I think that the other things that we're really intentionally doing, we talked about already, is that we're going to be formalizing who we want to see on that task force, right? So organizers, activists, leaders, we're going to be really leading that push, and we're going to deliver those, directly to the chair and to the staff there, because
Okay, thank you. Next questions are for Robert and then Matthew. Oh,
yes.
Matt, you can go. Yeah.
Sorry. I'll answer the question about Palm Beach. Currently, we don't have an active chartered chapter in Palm Beach. The Palm Beach's Democratic Party website is just pretty outdated, so they don't have a listed active charter chapter that has gone through our state certification process. But I know that there has been a lot of interest in Palm Beach to form a chapter. I know Nathan's here on this call. Hillary Keys is on our state board, and she's from Palm Beach County. So we have a very active base in these South Florida counties, but we're still working on getting those chapters aligned. And those will definitely be really important for 2026 elections. As we know, there's some very competitive congressional primaries happening in Southeast Florida. So we definitely need as much support as possible. So once again, I'll be dropping my email in the chat for whoever wants to get in contact about starting a chapter, needs to be routed in the right direction to get involved in their own county chapter, anything like that. So definitely more than happy to answer any questions about our chapters across the state.
Thank you, Matthew. Robert and Matthew, if you wanted to ask your questions.
Yes,
Robert?
I would like to know what percentage of the DNC is made up of people who are actually elected from their state conventions, and what percentage of them are made up of what you might call super delegates, people who have a position. I was wondering if that had an impact on the on the way things turned out. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I can take this one. So there's 448 DNC members. I believe, if I'm correct, at least 70 of which are appointed by the chair. And then and then there's a couple across the board, like myself, High School Democrats of America, Young Democrats of America. I think that makes up I'm not sure the exact number, but definitely not a majority that are ex officio seats. And then the overwhelming majority are directly elected from their state party. So, for example, in California, I think we have 20 DNC delegates out of our like 29 member delegation. So I'm not sure what the exact number is because there's a lot of different ex officio seats that receive levels of representation. I don't think that that was a factor, largely because the people who killed it were the ones in committee. So committee is a bit different because these are the people who get direct appointments by the chair or win elections within their caucuses. So it's less of the fact that the DNC members themselves weren't elected, but more of the fact that these were people handpicked by, the DNC officers and largely in line with a lot of their priorities. And that's, what we saw play out.
If
Thank
I
you
could
so much.
follow that up with just,
Go for it.
so is it possible that the resolution would have passed if it was made up entirely of people who were elected by their state conventions, or was the difference, was there a spread that made that not really a factor?
It's possible, but if, in my personal opinion, I think it would have been similar just because the average DNC member is like your super Democratic Party activist. And because of that, the vast, like, I think even the most progressive members are still very, like, I believe in the direction the institution like goes in. And actually, historically, Ken Martin is a more progressive chair compared to the past, like Jamie Harrison and such. So in my opinion, I don't think it would have been much different. Yeah, I think for me, the moral of the story is more people who aren't kind of the status quo Democratic Party activists have to gun for seats like this, people like Allison. And I think that's the best way out of it because as it stands right now, the average DNC member is not in lockstep with the average Democratic Party voter.
Can I add to that, Sanjay? Thank you so much
Of
for
course.
setting up the answer. I have a slightly different perspective. So when I was at the DNC, I had many conversations with folks who are on the resolutions committee. And people who are appointed by the chair specifically told me I didn't feel comfortable voting against something that the chair was putting forward or voting for something that the chair had put something against, right? Because Allison's resolution was put forward and there was what really essentially was a counter resolution by Chair Martin. And so folks who are appointed by the chair felt that their position was one that the chair granted them, and therefore they had to push forth what the chair would want, which is really problematic in many ways, but that was the position that they stated. Additionally, like as you get concentrated in the committees and the groups, so the resolutions committee, even those people elected to it are going to be the super activists. Is that what you described it, Sanjay? The super activist Democratic Party members. Whereas if you have like the entirety of the DNC membership, if they had voted on the resolution, I would think that it would have been, I don't know if it would have passed because the people who are able to participate are folks who maybe don't have full-time jobs and have more resources to travel 3 times a year, 2 to 3 times a year. But it would have been a very close vote and potentially the resolution could have passed. Whereas in the resolutions committee, because those people are the super activist ones, and a lot of them are appointed, the resolution failed by, it only had a few votes in support and the overwhelming majority were against.
Matthew?
Yeah. No, that's fine. I have nothing.
Hello, hi, yes. My name is Matthew. Sorry, I came in a little late on the meeting. But I wanted to ask, especially like as the Progressive Caucus here in Florida, we obviously have so much like opinions on things like Palestine and others, but I wanted to ask, like, as the Progressive Caucus, what is the opinion in regards to Puerto Rico and everything going on there right now? Now, before anything, I will say I am fundamentally against statehood. Fundamentally against statehood. and believe in independence or free association. And I believe that more progressive people within the party do believe in that. While I feel as though even other people that say they might be progressive will just look up a resolution and be like, no, Puerto Ricans want to become a state, and not understand the context, the history, anything behind it. And I want to know where, especially here in Florida, with us being the Progressive Caucus here, like what we're doing to like about that, considering we have one of the highest Puerto Rican populations outside of the island.
Yeah, Matthew. So I 100% understand the question, and I will say the biggest problem is a little earlier on the call, we did mention that we just started our platform committee. And our platform committee and our state caucus platform has not been updated since 2018. So since I've been in middle school. So it's very outdated. And I do not believe that it does mention Puerto Rico. And that is quite frankly, the big misstep of our state caucus. So that is one issue that our state platform committee can really seriously fix and rectify. So right now, the official caucus position, I will say, really isn't one. But that is something that we can work on and vote on in our state convention that is happening next year, like 4 months or so in February. So that is something that I do think is definitely an issue that the state caucus needs to address, and that is one of the things that we'll be hosting in our platform committee as a topic of discussion. But yeah, I hope that answers, even though it's not the best answer that you're probably looking for. But it is an issue we're trying to fix and solve.
No, that's great. I'm just happy that there's something at all and that there's a voice for this stuff, because I find, unfortunately, so many people, even though there's so many Puerto Ricans around, you have, even Democrats, like more corporatist Democrats, like, David Jolly that's running for our governor, coming into our county talking about Cubans and Venezuelans when there's over like 40,000 Puerto Ricans here, and there's only estimated about like 6,000 Cubans and about 1,000 Venezuelans. Like we seem to get, just overlooked unless there is a hurricane that's actively hitting our island.
So
if I may, this is a subject that we tackled a bit at PDA with a few town halls over the last few years. We were, and maybe Matthew's familiar with the legislation, we were broadly supportive of policy positions taken by AOC and legislation introduced by Nydia Velázquez at the federal level. And the people we were working with were, I believe, it would be fair to say, are broadly sympathetic to your point of view, Matthew. But what was being put together in terms of legislation was, it did speak to the specificity of the type of resolution that could happen in Puerto Rico, but was, of course, for self-determination. Though the nuances of it I cannot quite entirely recall, but the nuances of the type of self-determination and the way that that would proceed, that would be supported by the legislation put forward by Representative Velázquez, who's from New York City, would not be in the service of the interests of the people who were promoting statehood. How exactly it was achieving that nuance, I'm not sure, but I believe the people we were working with were very sympathetic to Matthew's point of view and saw that Velázquez's legislation was the way to proceed in supporting that. And we had a town hall with the mayor of San Juan and everything about it. And also in terms of, however, just so this is also important to note about PDA, we do follow the lead of our state chapters. So we're not here nationally to dictate. If Florida PDA took a particular position, we would just accept that as Florida PDA's position. And if we were to adopt a national position, it would inform it, but not over-determine it. So there's a lot of autonomy for PDA chapters, and certainly within the Progressive Caucus and the state Progressive Caucuses, that autonomy and logic of autonomy also pertains.
On how?
Yeah, I just wanted to also piggyback on what you were saying, Matthew. This is an opportunity for other Matthew, to you and any other people from your community to participate in the conversations that are happening. This is the idea that we want to bridge the community, as Matthew read in the beginning of our meeting. We're bridging the progressive community, and I liked what one of our members said earlier. I forgot who it was, but about not representing the Democratic Party to young people, but rather representing people to the Democratic Party in the same way we represent progressives in the Democratic Party. And so, for me, as I see it, one of our priorities should be at the State Progressive Caucus. I'm actually going to remove my video because I feel like I'm lagging a little. But for what I see as what we should be doing, is doing a concrete canvassing of people of Democrats in Florida, get them to update their vote by mail, especially because of the state legislature and the anti-democratic practices of removing people from the vote by mail rolls. Using that as an opportunity, as the Mamdani campaign has shown, to do a listening campaign. And there's actually other, I think it was an Iowa county party, I can't remember which one, or maybe it was in Illinois, that was doing a listening campaign, and they had a lot of success in getting people out. And so we can understand what are the issues that are affecting people. And so this is an example of we would be talking to people from the Puerto Rican community, from a multitude of diasporas, and to get their understanding. And then also, like Matthew was saying, our president, Matthew, making sure that our policy reflects our communities. And so maybe we can have this be a part of our building of our membership. And I say this as our membership committee chair. How can we utilize the party resources like our access to Vote Builder and voter files, but then also identify the people who are already ideologically aligned with us so that we can continue to develop the broad progressive base that is the Democratic Party. So I hope that ends.
If I may, Angel, you actually asked, well, is there any direct follow-up to that? Because Angel asked some questions about the working class and the Democratic Party working class participation that I meant
that
to
wasn't a
answer.
question. No, that was in response to the other Matthew had asked about Puerto Rico.
Right,
and
Puerto Rico.
What our state caucus is doing with regards to issues-based organizing. So he can
Well, if
get
Matthew or
involved,
Matthew want to
anybody from the
respond,
Puerto Rican community.
yeah. But then I want to speak to something you spoke about earlier, actually, that was struck me as very important that I didn't comment on.
I would say, yeah, I would just definitely support us doing more like work on that. I am active with other groups, especially other very progressive groups. I am also a DSA member in the local community and been very connected with like the Puerto Rican independence movements and the ones that organized the Puerto Rican independence march on Orlando City Hall. So I can definitely, give a lot of people that can give like a plethora of opinions about the island in Puerto Rico.
I want to go back to something Angel said earlier in his question, and there you brought up a number of things I didn't speak to. You spoke about working class participation in the Democratic Party. There's a great organization called the Center for the Study of Working Class Politics. They're somewhat affiliated with Jacobin Magazine. I think they did a study that of all people running for higher office within the Democratic Party, including primary candidates or competitive primary candidates, running for state legislature in both houses, governors, statewide offices, House of Representatives, United States House of Representatives, Senate, and President, that only 1.7% of Democratic Party candidates would qualify by standard criteria as working class candidates. That's how completely squeezed out working class candidates are from running for office in the contemporary Democratic Party. And it's because it's exactly what Angel spoke about. You need to have money, or you need to know people who have money. And working class people, of course, don't have the money to fund their campaigns. And again, this doesn't go to local city council. By the way, there are about almost 600,000 elected officials in the United States of America, about 590,000. Almost all of them are state and local. In fact, most of them, the vast majority are local. Of course, working class people can run for those offices. But to run at least at the state assembly level and above, it takes money, or you need to have access to people who have money. And that is completely suffocating working class participation as candidates. And the working class is the majority of the population. And the Democratic Party is failing itself when that's the case. And there's a fantastic podcast called Shifting Terrain that I recommend to people that studies exactly this question about working class participation in politics and running for office, and the struggles that working class candidates have in trying to even be remotely competitive as candidates for higher office. It's called shifting terrain. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're getting a little bit late in terms of time. So I'll call on M for a question, and then I think we'll get wrapped up almost.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. This is Imad Salem. I am the vice chair of the Texas Progressive Caucus. And people, when they hear Progressive Caucus in Texas, they say, what? We don't know there's progressives in Texas. But yes, we have a lot of progressives. And this Progressive Caucus was created about 3 years ago. And I'm proud to say that the Progressive Caucus, in cooperation with other organizations here in Texas, we were the first state party in the nation to issue a ceasefire resolution in November 2023, 1 month after the October attack. So the Progressive Caucus last year was able to put together multiple resolutions and platform planks. And if you look at our platform, I put it in the chat, the Texas Progressive Caucus was able to make the Texas Democratic Party platform the most progressive platform in the nation. You look at it, especially on the bottom of the platform, the last couple of pages about international relations, you will see how progressive the Texas Democratic Party became after the establishment of the state Progressive Caucus. And here I want to thank Allison for making that resolution 18 and thank Nadia for keeping us updated and what is going on with that resolution. I was on the executive committee of the Texas Democratic Party for 8 years before we established the Progressive Caucus, and it has always been a challenge to pass anything for Palestine. And being a Palestinian refugee myself, who lived in a Palestinian refugee in Amman, Jordan, a refugee camp in Amman, Jordan for 11 years before I came to this country. And I was there because the Israeli army came to my village in 1967 and pointed machine guns at us and asked us to leave, otherwise we will die. So my mom put us on a pickup truck and drove us to Amman, Jordan, where I lived in a refugee camp for 11 years until I came to this country. So I want to thank you, Allison. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Alan Minsky. And I am part of the Progressive Caucus National Meeting, and I do meet with you whenever there's a meeting. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for everyone, for all the progressives who are fighting for justice in the Middle East, justice for the Palestinian people. The question is always, it is easier to move the local party, because I see Aftab Siddiqui is here also on the call. And I want to thank him for fighting with me at the local party here in Texas, where back in 2008, it was hard to put or move anything for Palestine. And as soon as people heard the word Palestine, they used to walk around, go away. I mean, they don't want to even hear it. Last convention we had here last year in Tarrant County, the resolution passed unanimous, 100%, not even one individual delegate voted against it. So in Texas, it's becoming a progressive state, especially on this issue and all other issues. And the state party also is progressive, and we just elected the first young chair, Chair Kendall Scuttle. We just elected him, and I think he's in his mid-30s. So, and he's a progressive guy. So this is all part of all of us working together and all of us working to move our state parties forward. And I think local and state is easier than national. And national, like someone mentioned earlier, you have to have an income, a full, I mean, you cannot be working full time and being on the DNC. So it has to be someone with a business maybe, or maybe an attorney that has an office and does not mind going away 5 days, whatever, for these meetings. But anyway, I thank you all for working very hard, and we need, I guess, more input from our national leadership, how to move the DNC forward and how to make them more progressive and stand up and support all our issues. Thank you, everyone.
Jim?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with you. It's time for us to start wrapping it up a little bit. We're going on 2 hours now, very close. But I wanted to address something that was brought up a couple of times in our chat, and that is this question that is, going around right now regarding opening the FDP primaries to NPA voters. There were several questions regarding that, and I just wanted to mention that that is a proposal that has not even been addressed yet by the state executive committee. We haven't gone there yet. It's just something that Chair Fried is playing with, and Allison noticed. You're absolutely right. It is another 2-hour discussion. I just wanted to kind of let people know that it is not something that has been decided, and that there will be a lot of discussion about that. It would change things monumentally and have long-term repercussions for the Democratic Party in the state. So it is not anything that we can address lightly. But it's my understanding that it will probably be a subject of discussion at the next state executive committee. I do want to say that, we do have a group of progressives that work within the party, that we communicate with each other on a regular basis. And we will probably have that discussion before the state executive committee to, kind of figure out what direction we're going to take as progressives, because right now it's probably not the best idea. So just leaving it at that, but no decision's been made, and it would be it would require a change in the state law that the Democratic Party would have to request. It's a much more difficult decision, or a much more difficult process than people think. It's not just something that we can decide to do and then do it. The state election law has to be changed, and the state attorney general has to agree to it, and there would be all kinds of roadblocks in the meantime. So just wanted to throw that out there in case anybody had any questions. That's a discussion for, like Allison said, that's a 2-hour discussion, a couple of months from now, I hope. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, and what Jim echoed, we have not made an official decision in any Florida Democratic Party level, really to support this open primary idea. We have not made a vote as a state caucus, rather, or not to support or oppose it. I will say I have my own very strong personal feelings about this idea. But right now, our state caucus has not made an endorsement or disapproval of this initiative. That's a whole other 2-hour discussion. We'll hopefully be hosting that for another meeting in the near future. Just want to once again thank all of our amazing guest speakers tonight. Give a big round of applause. I told them 1 hour, and they stayed on. So thank all of our amazing guest speakers once again. If you guys want to drop any contact information in the chat so that people can reach out to you, continue to support your advocacy, because this is how we really do build a better Democratic Party across the country, and our states and our DNC. This really is it. We have leaders from the next generation. We have leaders who have been in the game for a while and have been fighting for decades for basic human rights. And I think that is very, very important. So I did see Matthew Crowley join. I'll give him about 3 minutes to kind of just talk about his election, since he is our one endorsed candidate in the state for this November election so far. Matthew's absolutely amazing, so I'll give him some time. But if folks have to hop off, definitely feel free to. But once again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
You can
Thank
also
you to-
just wait for Matthew.
Is he still on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, just want to again thank everybody for, if you are still on, that's great. Just gonna run through real quick. I know y'all are tired. I'm tired, but my name is Matthew Crowley, and I'm running for Winter Haven City Commission for seat 4. Winter Haven is a small city here in Polk County. If you know anything about Polk County, you know everything about Polk County. I'm running because our city should serve the working class, not the wealthy few. I'm a paraeducator. I work in special education in a local high school here in Polk County. I'm a union member. I'm on the executive board of my union. I'm a husband and a father, and I see every day how working class families are left struggling while developers and corporations get catered to at City Hall every single meeting. You know, this campaign is about building solidarity. It's about uniting neighbors, workers, and families to demand a city that belongs to all of us, you know, not just special interests. I believe affordable housing isn't a luxury, it's a right. You know, clean water and safe neighborhoods aren't bargaining chips, they are public goods. And when we organize, you know, when we stand together, we have the power to take back our city, our state, and our nation from the insiders, and build specifically a Winter Haven where, you know, dignity, justice, and community all come before profit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew.
Yeah.
And once again, there are way too many Matthews. But you can support Matthew by clicking any of the links that I sent in the chat. There is an Act Blue link to donate to his campaign. As we all know, these smaller city commission elections really need every single dollar. Every single dollar can really heavily impact campaigns. We do have a Mobilize for our Day of Action, where we'll be canvassing for Matthew out in Winter Haven, but we'll also be doing a statewide phone bank for Matthew. So there's tons of ways to get involved and help him in this campaign. But thank y'all once again for joining us tonight for a very lively and very long discussion. But these types of things do take a long time to really talk about, because this is the future of our party. And we need a party that actually represents everyday people. So thank you all so much for joining us, and have a good rest of your night.
Thank you, everyone.